Hello, hello, hello. I thought that I would not build. I thought that I would do a update to my damage over time bleed puncture build. Since I've learned some new things, I was in the Discord and I started talking to the devs about some of the mechanics of bleed. So before I get into the changes that I've made and how the build is going so far, I wanted to talk to you about bleed. Bleed comes with a base of 40 physical damage, but that 40 physical damage is over the duration of bleed, which means that while bleed lasts 4 seconds, you are only doing 10 physical damage per second for the duration. There are items that will help you increase the duration of bleed, but I haven't gotten that far. Now, knowing that, let's get into the build itself, starting with Puncture. Now, Puncture at its base does 30% bleed damage. And another way that bleed works is any chance over 100% gives you another chance to stack another bleed element. In this build, we have over 1,000% chance to bleed, which is around 10 stacks of bleed at any given moment. At base, just with Puncture itself, I spec'd into Peripherate for the extra 100% chance to bleed, which in itself is another bleed stack. 5 points into Peripherate. I did 4 points into Bloodthirst, which is just more bleed chance. Hunger, which increases the stacks of Bloodthirst, is 3 points for more bleed chance. I spec'd into Press the Attack with just 1, since it does give Frenzy on hit, and it doesn't stack, so you're not going to get more attack speed with Frenzy. I only needed 1 point for the extra attack speed, because every time that I hit something, I'm going to get that buff anyways. I also spec'd into Cadence of Death, which means that every third puncture will deal more damage to Puncture itself. But damage to Puncture will not affect the damage over time of the bleed element. The only reason why I spec'd into Cadence of Death was for the 20% increased area of Puncture. If you are your first time playing Puncture, you're going to realize that Puncture doesn't have too much area, which means that you have to be able to position yourself in a way to hit in a line. It does have Pierce, which helps with clear a lot, but this is just for extra area whenever my third hit comes across. I spec'd 1 point into Toxic Delivery, which is poison chance, but the only reason I spec'd into Toxic Delivery was to get down here to a Efficious Toxins. And what this does is it at five stats into Efficious Toxins, you get a 50% chance to apply Efficious Toxins, which is a debuff that makes your enemy take increased damage over time. That's the main setup for Puncture, is 5 into Peripherate, 4 into Bloodthirst, 3 into Hunger, 1 into Press the Attack, 1 into Cadence of Death, 1 into Toxic Delivery, and 5 into Efficious Toxins. I'm using a Decoy for defenses mostly. Decoy will help with bosses when you need to get the boss to stop attacking you. And the way that I set up my Decoy was I put 5 into Embedded Spikes, which gives Damage Reflect. And Damage Reflect just makes them take damage whenever they attack it. Then I put 1 into backup buddy, so I have an extra charge of Decoy in case I need to drop another one. I put 5 into lasting presence, which will increase the duration of the decoy, but it also increases the cooldown. I'm not really too worried about the cooldown because I already have, from backup buddy, another charge set up. I put 4 into the shadows, which gives you dodge rating whenever the decoy is active, and it's 200% at the dodge rating, which is very helpful for boss fights or whenever your decoy's active, you just get that extra defense, which is great. I spec 2 into efficient constructions just to make it cost less mana, but the only reason I did that was to get over here to sonic detonation. Now, sonic detonation will emit a sonic wave, but it inflicts frailty. Now, frailty makes it to where your enemies deal less damage. 6% less damage per stat. Less damage is good. That just means that you're not going to get hit as hard as long as they have stacks of frailty on them. So that's my little defensive decoy setup. 5 into embedded spikes. 1 into backup buddy, 5 into lasting presence, 4 into the shadows, 2 into efficient construction, and 3 into sonic detonation. I'm also using shift as my movement skill. The way that I set shift up was that I put 3 into Shadow of Recuperation, which will give you health every time you shift. I put 4 into Jade Quiver, which means every time you shift, you get 4 Jade Quivers. And the Jade Quivers will give you, or a Jade Arrow will give you increased crit strike chance and increased poison chance. But we're damage over time, so we can't crit. We don't deal anything with crit. But the Jaded Arrows, with the Venom tipped arrows, will give you more damage over time. So I did put 4 into Jade Quiver, and I put 5 into Venom tipped arrows, which means that my 4 shots after I shift will do 125% damage over time, which is great for DPS. Over here on the right side, I spec'd into velocity, which is you deal increased damage for 1 shot. This is just 1 shot. Whenever you use your non-channeled skill after a shift. Since we're not channeling Puncture, we get the extra 50% increased damage for that 1 shot. I also spec'd into the bleed chance that is right next to it. The hypo, whatever that word is. For 1 shot, you also get an extra bleed chance, which is 120% bleed chance, and the more bleed chance you have, the more bleed stacks you could add on to your enemy. More bleed stacks is just a lot of damage in general. But I spec'd 4 into here strictly to get to Jagged Cuts, and Jagged Cuts will give you 50% increased bleed effect and 50% increased bleed duration, but it's only for 1 shot. So you shift, and on your 1 shot, you will get 120% increased bleed chance, bleed duration, and bleed effect. So that's 3 into Shadow Recuperation, 4 into Jade Quiver, 5 into Venom Tipped Arrows, 2 into Velocity, 4 into Hypo Velmia, and 2 into Jagged Cuts. I'm also using Dark Quiver, and the way that I have Dark Quiver set up is defensive and offensive. So what I did was I put 2 into Scourge Quiver, which will increase the damage over time on your next bow attack, but you have to pick up the quiver. So you get 120% increased damage over time whenever for that one shot while you have your black arrow. Then I spec in the Crimson Quiver, which will give you Crimson Shroud. And Crimson Shroud, can I press Alt on this? Will grant bleed chance and less damage over time taken. So for 5 seconds after picking up an arrow from Dark Quiver, you will get increased bleed chance, which just goes for more bleed stacks. So that's 5 into Crimson Quiver, and then Lacerating Arrows is just more bleed chance for Puncture and physical penetration. And that's 100% bleed chance whenever you pick up an arrow. It's very good for DPS. But then I'm also using Mending on my black arrow with 3 points into Mending, which is like health pots if I don't have any. I'll cast Dark Quiver, and every time I pick up a quiver, I get 60 health, which is very nice. And then I have 3 into Nightfall, which gives me a stack of Dark Shroud for 4 seconds, which grants me a Glancing Blow chance and dodge rate, which is very good defensively also. And you get 3 Dust Shroud stacks whenever you pick up the quiver. So for the Dark Quiver setup, it's 4 into Scourge Quiver, 5 into Crimson Quiver, 1 into Lacerating Arrows, 3 into Mending, and 3 into Nightfall. I'm also using Smoke Bomb. The way that I set up Smoke Bomb is offensively mostly. I put 5 into Lingering Fumes, which will allow your Smoke Bomb to last longer. I put 1 into Concealed and Carnage, which grants Crimson Shroud, which will allow you more bleed chance, less damage over time taken. And bleed chance is just more bleed stacks, which is increased damage. Then I put 1 into Smoke Blades, just to get to Hidden Blows, which allows Puncture to have a chance to cause enemies to bleed, which is 200% bleed chance while you're standing inside of the smoke. More bleed chance, more bleed stacks, and more bleed stacks is increased damage. So I already have the Smoke Bomb that lasts longer, but I would have liked it to have more area. So then I spec'd 4 into Generosity. That way it has a larger starting area, but it does not increase the maximum area. I spec'd 1 into Thick Smoke, which will slow enemies that walk into your Smoke Bomb, just to get to Impending Gloom, which increases the rate at which Smoke Bomb goes out. It gives it a radius of 40, and it grows 40% faster. So for Smoke Bomb, it's 5 into Lingering Fumes, 1 into Smoke Blades, 4 into Hidden Blows, 1 into Concealed Carnage, 4 into Generosity, 1 into Thick Smoke, and 4 into Impending Doom. And that's the general skill setup that I use. Now, let's go over the passives. For the rogue base passives, I went with 8 into Swift Assassin, just for the attack speed. I went 5 into Lethal Cadence, which allows increased damage for every third shot, and because of the Puncture node we took, every third shot also has increased area. So you're doing more damage in an increased, not more damage, you're doing increased damage into a larger area. I also did 5 into Disembowel, which will apply 5 bleed stacks on every third non-channeling melee, throwing, or bow attack. Every third attack will also inflict 5 bleed stacks on top of your bleed chance, which is increased damage. So your third attacks are pretty strong. I also spec'd into Dodge and Parry, which gives additional dodge rating and a chance to receive Glancing Blow, which is 2 defenses. And having defensive layers is always a good thing. So with 5 of them, you get 30 dodge rating and 15% chance to receive a Glancing Blow. What Glancing Blow does is you get 35% less damage, which just means you don't get hit as hard. I spec'd 1 into Guile, which is more dodge rating plus a little bit of poison res. I spec'd 2 into Evasion, which just means that you take less damage while you're moving. So while you're running around and kiting, you take 10% less damage. And you also have an increased dodge rating while you're moving around, which is great defensively. And I also spec'd 1 into Agility, which gives you haste, a chance to gain haste on hit. It's only a 5% chance, but haste will increase your move speed by 30%, which is cool, because having that move speed every once in a while is really nice. But then it also increases your damage based on your move speed, which is pretty good offensive too. We took the Marksmen for the Puncture. Actually, back to the rogue passives. That's 8 into Swift Assassin, 5 into Lethal Cadence, 5 into Disembowel, 5 into Dodge and Parry, 1 into Guile, 2 into Evasion, 1 into Agility. And then as the as the Marksman, we took Draining Arrows for increased attack speed, but it also gives you health gained, which is great because you have a way to get your health back while you're attacking, and the attack speed helps stack more bleed over those 4 seconds. So 8 into Draining Arrows. I put 2 into Concentration, which will increase your damage by 24% while you have Concentration, but you already have Concentration by default. So since we do have Concentration, I spec'd 8 into Meditation for more dodge rating, but it also decreases the cooldown of Concentration when you do get hit, because Concentration will go away if you get hit by a melee attack or by a minion within 4 meters of you. So you get it back faster, and you get increased dodge rating, which is really good defensively. And I put 2 into Reflection, which is more dodge rating and a little bit of movement speed, which synergizes well with Agility and the haste for the increased damage per movement speed. I spec 8 into Prolonged Demise, which just means that you take less damage over time while you're wielding a bow, and you deal increased damage over time. So with max stats, you deal 48% damage over time, which is great offensively, but you also take 8% less damage over time, which is huge. Less damage is a multiplier, while increased is additive. You always want to go for the multipliers. So that's 8 into Prolonged Demise. I also spec 10 into Barbed Arrows, which will increase your physical damage, but also it's more chance to bleed, which is 50% chance to bleed on bow hit, and the more chance to bleed you have, the more damage you will do. And then for more attack speed, I spec'd into Arrow Storm, which will give you 60% attack speed for 3 seconds, but then it has a 10-second cooldown, which is really good to stack bleed stacks really fast. So for the Marksman so far, it's 8 into Draining Arrows, 2 into Concentration, 8 into Meditation, 2 into Reflection, 8 into Prolonged Demise, 10 into Barbed Arrows, and 6 into Arrow Storm. I also spec'd into some things of the Blade Dancer. The reason I did this is they had a passive that was called Blood Serpent's Blades, which gives global damage over time, which is increased damage. So for the Blade Dancer, it's 10 into Blood Serpent's Blade, or the global damage over time. Excuse me. 8 into Cloak of Shadows, which is more Glancing Blow. And Glancing Blow is 35 less damage, so the higher chance you have to receive a Glancing Blow, the less damage you take, which is great because less is a multiplier. It is awesome. And then I only spec'd 1 into Shroud of Dusk, and that is to get Dust Shroud when you get hit. It also gives you 10 health. But you get a 4% chance if you get hit to get Dust Shroud. And Dust Shroud will add 50 dodge rating and an extra 5% chance to receive a Glancing Blow. Glancing Blow is just less damage, which is great. So it's 8 into Cloak of Shadows, 1 into Shroud of Dusk, and 10 into Blood Serpent's Blades. So since we've been over the basic skills, we've been over the passives, let's get into the gear that I'm wearing. Bleed, as the element, can only be scaled by few things. Increased physical damage will increase the damage that the bleed does. Increased damage over time will increase the damage that the bleed does. And chance to bleed will increase the amount of stacks that you were able to stack onto your enemy. Like I said, we have over 1,000% chance to bleed. So what you want to do is you want to get increased physical damage, increased damage over time, and chance to bleed on as much gear as you possibly can. So for the bow, this is what I have. Chance to chill is just defensive. For the armor, I have chance to bleed, which is more bleed stacks. I have physical penetration. Now penetration is a multiplier, which will take down the resistance of your enemy, and it will allow you to deal more damage to the enemy. I have stun avoidance and resistance. Stun avoidance is just so I don't get surrounded by enemies while I'm kiting. For the quiver, it's the same thing. It is damage over time, increased damage, chance to bleed, and resistance. resistance on the armor, resistance on the quiver. For the rings, increased damage over time, physical damage, resistance. Increased physical damage, damage over time, resistance. The helmet is just there strictly for the resistance, but the base gives 48 increased damage over time. I do work on getting a better helm, but resistance, damage over time. The amulet, same thing, it's got the resistances, increased damage over time, increased physical damage. You can get physical penetration on the amulet, which I'm probably going to do pretty soon. I would need to figure out if it's worth getting the... I need to figure out if the percentage, losing 50% or 40% of either increased physical damage or damage over time, will outscale the, I don't know, 5% pen that I might get on the amulet. I haven't done the math yet. These gloves, atrophy, will give you increased damage over time. Time rot, what that does is it makes it to where your bleeds will last longer on your enemies. You have a chance to slow, which is good defensively, because if they're slowed down, they can't hit you. 29% chance to slow attackers, which is great, and then you get 196% slow duration. So if you do slow them, they're slowed down for a pretty long time, but mostly these gloves are used just for the increased damage over time. I had to fight the boss just for the 79%. I had to fight the boss. I made a stash tab for it. I did right here. Atrophy. I had to fight the boss 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. It took me 6 times to fight that boss to get these 79% increased damage over time gloves. They do go up to 100, but I'm not going to complain over 79. The boots have 80% increased damage over time, which is great, but it also gives you an increased cooldown on your shift. And if you remember, the more you shift, the more bleed chance you have, which is more stacks, but you also get those jaded quivers, which is more damage over time. It is great to have a cooldown from these boots on your movement skill. Also, the scariest thing for me while I was leveling was needing to get out of the way of something and not being able to. These boots help with the cooldown, which is great, but it's mostly for the increased damage over time, and you have a chance to apply Doom on hit, which it only is for melee damage, which it doesn't really matter, but you also get a 19% chance to gain haste for 1 second on hit, and haste is what grants your move speed and also gives you a damage increase for your move speed, which is great. Same thing for the rogue relic or any relic, damage over time, physical damage, resistance. All of my idols have bleed chance on it. Chance to bleed, 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 chance to bleed. Increased damage over time, physical resistance, increased damage over time, physical resistance. So you want to stack as much bleed chance as possible on your gear, and then you want to increase the bleed damage by scaling increased physical damage and damage over time. Chance to bleed and physical penetration. It's good. I am just about fully res capped. I would need 1 more % into physical damage to be fully res capped. but you want to try to get resistances where you can't get damage. I have 367 armor at 16%, which is good. I have a 13% dodge chance, which will go up when I finish my passives. I have 428 stun avoidance, which is great. 13% ward retention, which is good. I have a 31% glancing blow chance. Glancing blow is where it's at because it's that 35% less damage, which is why I spec'd into that first. I don't think you realize just how huge 35% less damage is. It is huge. I also have 27% endurance and 153 endurance threshold. And 766 health, which is very, still, I would consider low life, but with the passives, I could fix it. So for now, defensively, I'm doing good. I'm going to continue to increase the dodge chance. The build is going smooth. I can try, before I cut this video, let me run into a level 75 area, because I haven't started pushing the build yet. I just got the gloves. And it's a very easy kickback play style. Slay enemies to locate the dragon. Okay. So you just hit them and run. As long as you're able to stack the bleed on them,
easy. Too easy.
then they'll just die. So you can move while you are stacking these bleeds on them, and they all end up just dying. Which is the one cool thing about bleed. Stack it and keep moving. If you're using a loop filter, which is something I'm not doing yet, I haven't been using a loop filter, is you can just pick up whatever drops, but just stack bleeds and keep moving. Stack your bleeds, keep moving.
Not happening.
You might have to attack one of them 2 or 3 times just to get the bleed stacks on them, but
too easy.
just stack your bleeds and keep moving. Very basic playstyle. Not really worried about anything.
Not happening.
Not even having to use my decoy. Like right here, I'll drop my decoy, I'll shift, I will drop my my smoke bomb, and I will melt this boss. He's dead. That's it. I didn't even use my dark quiver because I didn't need to, but that's about the basics of this build. There are some things that I would still like to work on with it, but if there's anything that you should remember, bleed chance, bleed chance, bleed chance will give you more bleed stacks, and 2 bleed stacks is double damage. 3 bleed stacks is triple damage. We have over 1000% bleed chance in this build, which is 10 stacks. 10 stacks is huge. But that's a little update of this build. When I finish it, or if it's completed, or if I figure something else out, I will be back and I'll give you guys an update for it. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all later.